I'm Emily Carter, 30 years old. Tonight, I walked into Azure, my restaurant in New York, for my parents' 30th anniversary dinner. But the second I showed up, my sister Jessica stood up, pointed at my simple dress, and sneered. "Emily, you're wearing that cheap thing to a place like this. If you're staying, why don't you make yourself useful in the kitchen like a server?" The whole table erupted in laughter. My mom wouldn't even look at me, and my dad was glued to his phone. I swallowed my anger and walked to the kitchen, not because I had to, but to keep the peace for their big night. They thought I was broke, a failure. What they didn't know, they were dining in my restaurant. And later, when Jessica's husband walked in and called me boss, their world turned upside down. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, hit that subscribe button and comment your story below. Let's talk about it. I stood at the edge of the dining room, my heart pounding as I watched the guests settle in. My sister Jessica Carter, 33 years old, was in her element, playing the perfect host for my parents' 30th anniversary dinner. She wore a sleek designer dress, her smile sharp as she greeted everyone except me. When I approached the main table, she blocked my path, her voice dripping with disdain. "Emily, this table's for family and important guests. You think you belong here?" She smirked, glancing at the other guests. "If you're so desperate to stay, go make yourself useful in the kitchen. That's more your speed, isn't it? Serving the guests?" Chuckled, their eyes darting between us. My mother, Susan Carter, looked away, adjusting her necklace like I wasn't even there. My father, William Carter, didn't bother looking up from his phone, probably closing another real estate deal. I clenched my fists, the sting of Jessica's words burning deep. "Fine," I said, my voice steady despite the fury bubbling inside. "I'll go to the kitchen. Not because I had to, but because I didn't want to ruin my parents' night. Besides, the kitchen was my domain, even if they didn't know it." As I walked through the swinging doors, the hum of the kitchen greeted me, pots clanging, knives chopping, the scent of sizzling garlic and citrus. My staff didn't bat an eye. They were used to me jumping in during big events. I nodded to Tom, a server who'd been with me since Azure opened. "How's it going out there?" I asked, tying an apron over my dress. "They're tearing into the scallops," he said, grinning. "But your sister's got opinions." Back at the main table, the first course, pan-seared scallops with a yuzu glaze, hit the plates. I'd spent months perfecting that dish, balancing the citrus tang with a buttery finish. It was a signature, a point of pride. But through the kitchen window, I saw Jessica pick at her plate, her nose wrinkling. "What is this?" she said loudly, loud enough for nearby tables to turn. "Some kind of weird fishy sauce? This is supposed to be fine dining." Susan leaned in, her voice low but cutting. "It's unconventional. Did they hire an amateur chef?" The guests murmured, some nodding along. William just shrugged, still scrolling on his phone. I gripped the counter, my knuckles whitening. Amateur, I'd poured my soul into every detail of Azure, from the menu to the staff training. These weren't just dishes, they were my art, my fight to prove myself after years of being dismissed. Jessica's voice carried again. "If I were running this place, I'd fire the chef. This is embarrassing for a Carter event." Susan sighed, shaking her head. "It's such a shame. This place had potential." Tom slipped back into the kitchen, his face tight. "They're not holding back out there," he whispered. "Your sister's telling everyone the food's a letdown." I forced a smile, but my chest tightened. I wanted to storm out to tell them they were eating my food in my restaurant. But I didn't. Not yet. I needed to keep my cool, make sure every plate was perfect. If they thought they could humiliate me in my own house, they were in for a surprise. I turned to my sous chef Maria, who was plating the next course. "Make sure the salmon's flawless," I said, my voice low. "They're not going to break me tonight." She nodded, sensing the edge in my tone. The kitchen was my sanctuary, the one place where I called the shots. Jessica could mock me, Susan could ignore me, and William could pretend I didn't exist. But out there, they were on my turf. And I was ready to show them exactly who they were dealing with. Standing in the kitchen, the clatter of pots and pans fading into the background, I couldn't shake the weight of Jessica's words. They weren't new. They took me back to Long Island, to the cold, sprawling mansion where I grew up. It was never a home, just a showcase for my dad's real estate empire and my mom's perfect image. My earliest memories weren't of family game nights or warm hugs. They were of being invisible. My sister Jessica Carter, 3 years older, was the star-poised, ambitious, the daughter my parents wanted. She was destined for boardrooms for carrying the Carter name. Me, I was the kid who'd rather be in the kitchen, the one they barely noticed. The only person who saw me was Margaret Lopez, our family's housekeeper. Margaret was more than staff. She was my sanctuary. At 8, I'd follow her into the kitchen after school, watching her dice carrots or simmer sauces. "You've got a gift, Emily," she'd say, her warm smile cutting through the chill of that house. She taught me to sear meat, to balance spices, to make something out of nothing. One day, I burned a tray of cookies, and instead of scolding me, she laughed. "Mistakes are how you learn, kid." In her kitchen, I wasn't the disappointing Carter daughter. I was just Emily, creating something real. But my family saw it differently. When I was 10, I spent hours with Margaret making ravioli from scratch, stuffing it with ricotta and herbs. I carried the plate to the dining room, my chest swelling with pride. Jessica, 13 and already sharp-tongued, pushed it away. "What's this supposed to be?" she scoffed, rolling her eyes. My mom didn't even taste it. "Emily, cooking's for the help," she said, her voice like a slap. "You're a Carter. Act like one." My dad, buried in his newspaper, muttered, "Focus on school. We don't need a cook in this family." I stood there clutching the plate, my face burning, as Jessica smirked at her friends across the table. It got worse. At 12, I overheard my mom in the parlor talking to a friend. "I wanted to be a chef once," she said, her voice low, almost bitter. "But my parents said it wasn't proper for a woman like me. I gave it up for this life." She paused, then added, "Emily's throwing away her potential on the same mistake." I froze outside the door, my heart sinking. My mom didn't just dismiss my passion, she resented it like it was a mirror of her own regrets. It wasn't just that they thought cooking was lowly. It was that my love for it reminded my mom of what she'd lost. The kitchen became my escape, but it came with a price. Jessica's taunts grew sharper. "Why don't you just work for us?" she'd say, loud enough for her friends to laugh. My mom would shake her head, sighing like I was a lost cause. My dad barely noticed, too busy building his empire. But Margaret was there, teaching me to chop, to taste, to trust myself. "You don't need their approval," she told me one night as we kneaded dough. "You've got something special, Emily. One day you'll show them." I clung to her words even as my family's rejection carved a hole in me. In that cold mansion, the kitchen was the only place I felt alive. The memory of that cold Long Island mansion lingered, but it was one moment at 18 that broke me. I'd just gotten the letter from the Culinary Institute of America, the best culinary school in the country. My hands shook as I read it: accepted full-time program, a chance to turn my passion into a career. For weeks, I'd dreamed of telling my family, hoping they'd finally see me. I pictured my dad nodding with pride, my mom softening her usual disapproval. Maybe Jessica would even stop her endless taunts. But deep down, I knew better. I waited for the right moment. It came one evening in the study where my dad spent most of his time. He was behind his desk, papers scattered, probably closing another multi-million-dollar deal. I knocked, clutching the acceptance letter. "Dad?" I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "I got into the Culinary Institute of America. It's a big deal. But I need help with tuition." He didn't look up from his papers. "Cooking school," he said, his tone flat. "Emily, that's not a career. It's a hobby. You're a Carter. We build empires, not dinners." I stood frozen, the letter crumpling in my hand. "It's not just cooking," I pushed back. "It's a business, a craft. I could be great at it." He finally met my eyes, but there was no warmth. "Great. You want to waste your potential on a kitchen? I'm not paying for that." His words hit like a punch, each one heavier than the last. I turned to my mom next, hoping for a shred of support. She was in the living room flipping through a magazine. "Mom," I started holding out the letter. "I got into CIA. It's what I've always wanted." She barely glanced up. "Emily, we've talked about this," she said, her voice cold. "You're meant for something bigger. Don't throw away your future on a whim." A whim I'd spent years in the kitchen pouring my heart into every dish. But to her, it was nothing. Jessica overheard from the hallway, her laugh sharp and cutting. "A cooking school," she said, stepping closer. "Emily, you're embarrassing yourself. Why don't you stick to something you can actually handle?" Her words stung, but it was my parents' silence that hurt more. Neither of them said another word. No encouragement, no compromise, just dismissal. That night I sat in my room staring at the letter. The Culinary Institute was my shot my way out of their shadow. But without their support, it felt impossible. Tuition was steep, tens of thousands of dollars, and I had nothing but a part-time job at a local diner. I thought about begging, about trying to change their minds. But the more I replayed their words, the clearer it became. They didn't just doubt me, they didn't believe in me at all. I made a choice. At 18, with nothing but a suitcase and a few $100s saved from waitressing, I left. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't leave a note. I just walked out of that mansion, away from Jessica's smirks, my mom's indifference, my dad's rejection. New York City was my destination, close enough to feel familiar, far enough to start over. I'd heard about restaurant jobs there, entry-level gigs that could lead to something bigger. I didn't know how I'd make it, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let their dismissal define me. The first few nights were rough. I crashed on a friend's couch, a girl from high school who'd moved to the city. I spent my days applying for jobs, my nights staring at that crumpled acceptance letter, wondering if I'd made a mistake. But every time I doubted myself, I thought of Margaret, her voice steady in my memory. "You've got something special, Emily." She'd believed in me when no one else did, and that was enough to keep me going. Leaving wasn't just about running away. It was about proving I could stand on my own. I wasn't a Carter in their world anymore. I was Emily, chasing a dream they couldn't understand, and one day I'd make them see what they'd thrown away. New York City hit me like a storm. My first job was washing dishes at a greasy diner in Brooklyn. The hours were brutal 10-hour shifts, my hands raw from scrubbing pots in scalding water. I made barely enough to cover a shared apartment in a rundown building, but every dollar went into savings. I wasn't just working, I was learning. I watched the cooks memorize their techniques and practiced recipes on my days off. Late at night, I'd scribble ideas for dishes, dreaming of a place where I could create. A year in, I landed a server job at a midtown bistro, a step up. That's where I met David Brooks, a line cook with a quick laugh and a knack for sauces. "You're wasted out here carrying trays," he told me one night, wiping sweat from his brow. "You've got a chef's eye. Get in the kitchen." David became my first real friend in the city. He'd sneak me into the prep line after hours, teaching me to julienne vegetables and reduce stocks. "Keep at it, Emily," he'd say. "You're going somewhere." The bistro was tough, but it was a classroom. I worked my way up to prep cook, then line cook, each role a battle. The head chef was a screamer, and the pace was relentless: orders flying, plates crashing, customers complaining. But I thrived in the chaos. I started experimenting, tweaking recipes when the chef wasn't looking. One night, I slipped a new dish onto the specials board: seared scallops with a yuzu glaze. Customers raved, and David grinned. "Told you," he said. "You're a natural." Still, I was scraping by. The dream of my own restaurant felt miles away until I met Elizabeth Hayes, a regular customer and investor. She'd come in every Thursday, always ordering the specials. One night, she called me over. "You made this?" she asked, pointing to a plate of braised short ribs. I nodded, bracing for criticism. Instead, she smiled. "This is art, Emily. You've got something special." We started talking about food, ambition, the industry. Elizabeth saw potential in me not just as a cook, but as a visionary. "If you ever want to build something of your own," she said, handing me her card. Call me. Years passed, each one a grind. I bounced between kitchens, learning from every chef, every mistake. By 25, I was sous chef at a high-end restaurant in Manhattan, saving every penny for my dream. David stuck with me, always pushing me to take risks. One night over cheap beers, I told him about my idea for a restaurant, Azure, a place where food wasn't just a meal, but a story. He didn't laugh. "Let's do it," he said. "I'm in." Elizabeth was the key. I pitched her my vision: a sleek, modern space in New York serving bold, creative dishes. My signature was a pan-seared salmon with a licorice-infused sauce, a risky blend of sweet and savory that took months to perfect. Elizabeth didn't hesitate. "I'm backing you," she said. "But you'll need to prove it." She connected me with investors, helped me secure a loan, and found a space in the heart of the city. David signed on as my head chef, bringing his grit and talent. Opening Azure was a gamble. The first year was brutal: long hours, tight budgets, critics circling like sharks. But we poured everything into it. The salmon dish became a hit, written up in food blogs, then magazines. Customers lined up for our tasting menu, raving about the flavors. By the second year, Azure was a name in New York's food scene, a testament to every late night, every burned dish, every door slammed in my face. I'd done it without my family. Jessica's taunts, my mom's cold dismissal, my dad's refusal to believe in me, they fueled me. Azure wasn't just a restaurant. It was proof I didn't need their approval to build something extraordinary. Back in the kitchen of Azure, I was in my element, directing my team like a conductor. The main course, pan-seared salmon with a licorice-infused sauce, was hitting the tables. It was my proudest creation, a dish that had put Azure on the map, praised by critics for its bold, unexpected flavors. I'd spent months perfecting it, balancing the sweet, earthy notes with a crisp sear. Tonight, it had to be flawless. But as I checked plates before they went out, a familiar unease crept in. My family was out there, and I knew they weren't done tearing me down. Tom, my server, slipped through the kitchen doors, his face tense. "Emily, you're not gonna like this," he said, keeping his voice low. "Your sister's at it again." I wiped my hands on my apron, my stomach tightening. "What now?" I asked, bracing myself. Tom hesitated, then said, "She's trashing the salmon." Loudly. "Says it's undercooked, tastes weird. Your mom's backing her up." I felt a surge of heat in my chest, my fingers gripping the counter. Undercooked. That dish was seared to perfection, checked by my sous chef Maria before it left the kitchen. I peered through the kitchen window, catching a glimpse of the main table. Jessica was holding court, her voice carrying over the clink of glasses. "This salmon is practically raw," she announced, pushing her plate away like it was garbage. "What kind of chef serves this at a place like Azure?" "It's embarrassing." The guests around her shifted uncomfortably, some murmuring agreement. My mom, sitting beside her, nodded slowly. "It's underwhelming," she said, her tone dripping with disappointment. I expected better for such an occasion. My dad, as usual, was glued to his phone, not even touching his plate. I clenched my jaw, the anger bubbling up. That salmon was the heart of Azure. The dish that had landed us in food magazines, the one customers waited weeks to taste. And Jessica, who'd never stepped foot in a kitchen, had the nerve to call it raw. My mom, who'd dismissed my passion, my whole life, was chiming in like she knew better. I wanted to storm out, to shove the reviews in their faces, to tell them this was my restaurant. But I didn't. Not yet. I had to keep it together for the sake of the night, for my team. Tom came back, his expression grim. "It's worse," he said. "Jessica's demanding we take the plates back. Says the whole table deserves a redo." I froze. A redo. That was a slap in the face, not just to me, but to my entire crew. Maria overheard and shook her head. "They're out of line, Emily," she muttered, plating another order. "You want me to handle it?" I shook my head, my voice tight. No. Let them talk. Keep the plates perfect. But inside I was seething. Every jab from Jessica, every sigh from my mom felt like a knife twisting deeper. They weren't just criticizing the food, they were dismissing everything I'd built. Years of dishwashing, late nights, burned fingers, and scraped together savings had gone into azure. That salmon wasn't just a dish. It was my fight. My proof I wasn't the failure they thought I was. And now, in front of a room full of guests, they were tearing it apart. I turned to the stove, checking the next batch of salmon myself. The sear was golden, the sauce glossy and fragrant. Perfect. I whispered more to myself than anyone else, but the anger wouldn't settle. Tom hovered nearby, waiting for instructions. "What do you want to do, Emily?" he asked. I took a deep breath, forcing calm. "Nothing yet," I said. "Let them eat. We'll deal with this soon." I wasn't going to let their words ruin my night. Not when I knew what was coming. Jessica's voice cut through again, loud enough to reach the kitchen. "If I were running this place, I'd fire the chef," she said, laughing. "This is a disgrace for a Carter event." My mom murmured something I couldn't hear, but the guests' chuckles told me enough. My dad didn't react, still scrolling. I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles white. They thought they could humiliate me in my own house. They had no idea what was about to hit them. The kitchen was a whirlwind, but my mind was on fire. Jessica's voice still echoed in my ears, calling my salmon raw and demanding a redo. I wanted to march out and set her straight, but I kept my focus on the plates, ensuring every dish leaving Azure's kitchen was perfect. Then Tom burst through the doors, his face a mix of nerves and urgency. "Emily, your sister's at it again," he said, clutching a bill. "She's complaining about the check now, wants to talk to someone in charge." I frowned, wiping my hands on my apron. The check. What's her problem this time? Tom handed me the bill, which listed only the wine, hundreds of dollars worth of vintage bottles my family had ordered. "She says it's ridiculous," he said. "Claims it shouldn't just be wine. She's calling for the manager." My heart skipped. I'd comped the entire meal, appetizers, entrees, everything as a gesture for my parents' anniversary. They didn't know it was my call, my restaurant. "Get David," I told Tom, my voice steady despite the anger simmering inside. David Brooks, my head chef and friend, had been with me since the bistro days. He knew how to handle tough customers, but this wasn't just any table. This was personal. I stayed in the kitchen, watching through the window as David approached the main table, his apron still dusted with flour. Jessica was in full performance mode, waving the bill like it was evidence of a crime. "This is absurd," she said, loud enough for nearby tables to turn. "A few bottles of wine don't cost this much. Where's the rest of the meal? I want to speak to whoever's running this place." My mom nodded, her lips tight. "It's sloppy bookkeeping," she said. "Unprofessional for a place like this." My dad, for once, looked up from his phone, frowning at the bill but saying nothing. David stood calm, his hands clasped. "The bill's correct," he said evenly. The meal was comped, covered in full. Compliments of Emily Carter. The table went silent. Jessica's eyes narrowed, her voice sharp. "Emily, what does she have to do with this?" David didn't flinch. "She paid for everything," he said. "This is her restaurant. She's the owner." The words hung in the air, heavy and electric. Jessica's face froze, her mouth half open. My mom's hand tightened around her wine glass, her knuckles pale. I couldn't stay in the kitchen anymore. I untied my apron, smoothed my dress, and pushed through the doors. The dining room felt like a stage, every eye on me as I walked to the table. Jessica stared, her expression a mix of shock and disbelief. "Emily," she said, her voice wavering, "you're saying you own this place?" I met her gaze, unflinching. "That's right," I said. "Azure is mine. Every dish, every detail. I built this." Before anyone could respond, the restaurant doors swung open. Michael Reed, Jessica's husband, hurried in, his suit crisp, but his face tense. He scanned the room, then spotted me. Relief washed over him. "Boss?" he said, striding toward me. I didn't know you'd be here. I'm meeting the New York investor tonight, thought I'd swing by early. The table went dead quiet. Jessica's eyes widened, her fork clattering to the plate. My mom's glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor, red wine pooling like blood. Boss Jessica choked out, turning to Michael. What are you talking about? Michael blinked, confused, then gestured to me. Emily's our lead investor, he said. She's backing our new food tech startup managing restaurant supply chains. We've been pitching to her for months. If we close this deal, it's a game changer. He looked at me, oblivious to the storm he'd ignited. Right, boss. I nodded, keeping my voice calm. We're still reviewing the terms, Michael, I said. But I'm glad you're here. The truth was, I'd invested in Michael's company last year, drawn by their innovative platform for sourcing sustainable ingredients. Azure's success gave me the capital to branch out, and Michael's team had no idea I was a Carter until now. To them, I was just Emily the investor with a sharp eye for business. Jessica's face was ashen, her hands trembling. You, she whispered. You're his investor. My mom stared at the broken glass, her expression unreadable. My dad finally put down his phone, his eyes locked on me for the first time all night. The guests whispered, the air thick with tension. I stood tall, letting the moment sink in. They'd mocked me, dismissed me, but now the truth was out. I wasn't just the owner of Azure, I was the one holding the cards. Jessica recovered, first her voice sharp but unsteady. This is a joke, right? She said, forcing a laugh. You're not his investor. You're just... Emily. The way she said my name like it was an insult lit a fire in me. I stepped closer, my voice calm but firm. Just Emily, I built Azure from nothing, Jessica. I'm the one Michael's been pitching to for months, and I'm done letting you act like I'm less. Michael, still oblivious to the family drama, jumped in. She's the real deal, he said, turning to Jessica. Emily's investment could make or break our startup. We need her. His words hit like a second shockwave. Jessica's jaw tightened, and my mom's eyes flicked to me, searching for something to say. Then she spoke, her voice softer than I'd ever heard. Emily, we didn't know, she said. We're sorry for everything. I looked at her, at the woman who'd called my dreams a whim, who'd nodded along while Jessica tore me down. Sorry, it was too late for that. You're sorry now, I said, my voice steady but cold. Because I'm not the failure you thought. Because I'm someone you can't ignore. My dad shifted, clearing his throat. Emily, let's talk about this. He said, his tone almost pleading. We can make things right. I shook my head. No, I said. You had years to make things right. You chose not to. I turned to Michael, who looked caught in the crossfire. And you, I said, keeping my voice professional. Your startup has potential, but I'm passing on the deal. I don't trust partners who don't respect me. Michael's face fell, his mouth opening to protest, but I cut him off. This isn't about your pitch. It's about who you're tied to. I glanced at Jessica, letting the words sink in. Jessica's eyes flashed with anger. You're doing this to spite me, she hissed. You can't handle that. I'm better than you. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Better I built this place without a dime from our family. I clawed my way up while you mocked me. I don't need your approval, Jessica. I never did. The room was silent, the guests hanging on every word. My mom reached out, her voice breaking. Emily, please. We're family. Family, I said, my voice cracking for the first time. Family doesn't dismiss you, belittle you, or tell you your dreams are worthless. I found my family elsewhere. David, Elizabeth, my team here at Azure. They believed in me when you didn't. I paused, looking at each of them, Jessica fuming, my mom pale, my dad silent. I'm done with you, I said. Don't come back here. I turned and walked back to the kitchen, my heart pounding but my head high. The guests erupted into murmurs, some even clapping softly, but I didn't look back. In the kitchen, David was waiting, his grin wide. "You okay, boss?" he asked, tossing me a towel. I nodded, wiping my hands, feeling lighter than I had in years. "Better than okay," I said. "I'm free." This journey wasn't just about proving them wrong, it was about proving myself right. I learned something through all this. You don't need the approval of people who don't value you. Live for yourself, for what sets your soul on fire. For me, that's creating, whether it's a dish like my salmon with licorice sauce or a life I'm proud of. I built Azure not to impress my family, but to be true to who I am. To everyone listening to my story, thank you. You've been with me through every step, every fight, every triumph. If this resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Tell me, have you ever had to walk away from someone to find yourself? I want to hear your stories. They're what keep me going, just like this kitchen does. Let's keep creating together.